All right, so let me start with the first slide. Do a little mini upfront contract, even with you for today. Today's session will be a little bit, only about an hour, maybe not that much more, because I want to leave you time for you guys to do a little bit of homework as far as scripting out your no pressure script. I sent that to Jim. Did that go to everybody? The copy, the PDF of the no pressure script outline?
Nope.
No? Okay, well, make sure we send that out after this call so that everybody can script out their no pressure cold call script. This session is more of how do I put a couple of things together for this one, but would you agree with this statement? If you look, act, and sound like every other salesman, the prospect will treat you like every other salesperson. I mean, have we ever been frustrated that, we call and the prospect goes into that mode of that very standoffish and, he treats you like a salesman. You're just out there trying to help them. You're out there trying to show them a product or service that can really help them. Yet they treat you like that, taboo, that terrible salesperson. And it's typically because salespeople act like a typical salesperson. So here's what I really believe separates the amateur salesperson from the really professional salesperson. And when I use the verbiage amateur salesperson, what I'm talking about is that salesperson that's just barely getting by, not making quota, not making bonuses. And then the professional salesperson is the person who's really, the world-class salesperson really doing. Here's what really separates those two. They're selling the same product, same service, same delivery. Why is one professional salesperson doing really well and the amateur salesperson struggling? It's this: the professional salesperson can ask questions that are uncomfortable or out of place for the amateur salesperson. I really believe that's the difference. For example, when a client simply just says, "So what does it cost for ABC?" The amateur salesperson struggles with, "Well, I've got to ask you some more questions. We got to go through this. I can't give you a price right now. I've got to get more detail." And they struggle answering. Where the professional salesperson, as soon as somebody says, "Well, what do you charge for such and such?" Probably a lot more than you're expecting. Why? What were you expecting? And they reverse it on that person instead of trying to dance for them. And I think that's really what separates the really professional salespeople from the amateur salesperson, is the ability to ask questions and do things that most people would be uncomfortable saying. So the idea of this presentation is how to be different than everybody else. Make sense? Everybody okay with me? What we're talking about? Okay. So let's talk about two things: sales optimism and sales posturing. Sales optimism is really being realistic about what's going on in your world, what's happening with prospects, how people are really thinking about the marketplace. I have a salesperson on my staff who, I got to tell you, when we have our Wednesday calls with all of my salespeople to kind of summarize what's going on and just keep in touch with everybody, he is not realistic about what's going on. He's kept people in his pipeline and in his forecasting that have been there 6-7 months and nothing's happened, but he keeps talking about them in the prospecting. It's over, but he's still unrealistic about what's really happening there. When we talk about forecasting, he's always putting like 80-90% closing. He thinks he's going to close these people, and they're not closing at that time. He's just not being realistic about what's going on. What's really going on is he doesn't have enough people in the pipeline to just move on to the next one. So he keeps everybody in the pipeline hoping and praying that one of these just might turn into being something. And none of them are going to be. So I continually have to have conversation with them about, let's be realistic about really the activity and the potential of selling some of these people. Sales posturing is the ability to differentiate yourself from the competition. I like to say, and you've heard me say this before, different is better than better. And here's how I dramatize it. And I won't put anybody on the spot here, but I'll have somebody new in my training class, somebody working for a company, just gone through, the orientation, they're learning about the company. maybe with the company less than a month, and I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, so tell me today why, if I ask you, hey, why should I buy from ABC company? Why should I buy from your company? Give me the reasons. And the salesperson, the new person goes in and gives me a whole list of benefits and features. Well, we've been in business since 1977. We do this, we do that. And so today you're telling me, for example, that Eris is the best. If I need to have my equipment, my camera, I should buy from Eris, right? Yeah, John shaking his head, Greg shaking his head in here. Yeah, okay. Now here's the bad news. I was just talking to Jim, you're going to be fired this week. But don't worry, I've got you set up with your biggest competitor on Monday. So now when you're out selling, who's the best? See, the prospects realize that if you're sitting there telling a prospect today, let me tell you why we're the latest, greatest, most improved. They're thinking, you're only telling me that because you work for that company. If you work for somebody else, you tell me they were the best. So that's why you have to be careful about telling people that we're the latest, greatest, most improved, because remember this one line, prospects believe only half of what a salesman tells them, but 100% of what they say. We choose not to argue with our own data. So the professional salesperson gets the prospect to say what's important to them and really can do a very good job, the salesperson, of differentiating, not just saying we're better, but hey, can we have a conversation about what makes us different than our competition and why you might want to consider our offering over the competition. So that's really what I'm hoping to accomplish today, is you start thinking about how do I differentiate myself from the competition without just saying we're better. How are we different? And I really want you to get this in this theme I'm trying to dramatize to every one of my clients. Are you selling or are you servicing people? If you wake up every morning and think, well, I got to get up and I got to go sell somebody, I got to go make some sales, as opposed to I got to get up and start servicing, I got to go service these people, it'll change your entire mindset and how you present your product or service to the client. We are really in the service business because clients don't buy your product or service. They buy solutions to their problems. And that's what we're trying to get across, is how do we service that client? How do we get that client to understand that we are uniquely positioned to service them, and we are different than the competition in how we go about doing that? I think you'll make more sales in the system that you guys are learning through us now, not because you have a better product or service, although I'm sure you do, but because you do a better job of finding a problem that you can solve that the competition didn't find. I think that's what we really need to focus on, is what makes us different, that the client will realize, hey, I need to buy from Eris because they're offering a better and different service, better and different, not just better. So get into this mindset today of trying to service people. I did a training yesterday. I was telling Jim up in Wausau, and I asked everybody in the group, and there was about 20 people in the training. I said, everybody get your business cards out. Tell me what your business card says. And every one of them, it said regional sales manager, field service representative. It had some sales type of connotation to it. And I said, I think that's some of the problems we do, is we are even titling ourselves in sales. So we think that's what we have to do. And if we really start thinking about how can I service this person, how can I identify a problem that this person has, and then serve them in a manner that helps them solve that problem at a price they can afford. So it's just a mindset I'm trying to get everybody of my clients, I'm trying to work with this whole thing on. Customer care, service is not just selling. It is out there realizing that this person has a lot of different choices. They've got a lot of places they could go, but why should they buy from you? And everybody else is telling them that we're better. Every company's out there telling them they have a better product or service. To differentiate yourself, talk about what service you can provide to them. So the whole thing is, this is a discovery process. Sales should be like you're the tour guide. Your job is to guide this person, and together you and they discover that they need Eris, that they need your product or service. You know, most people think that sales is about convincing. Matter of fact, if I doubt any of you really, when you got kids, really were thinking, boy, I hope this person grows up to be a salesperson. I mean, we have this negative connotation about sales only because people think sales is about convincing, coercing, manipulating, tricking somebody to buy something they don't need or want. The dreaded word upsell. I mean, I've had clients that, they teach our guys how to upsell. And that negative connotation. Upselling is okay. Does the client need it? Does the client need that product or service? Are we just selling for our reasons, or are we selling for the prospects? And that's the key. Anytime you come across that you are selling for your reasons instead of the customers, you're a hard closer. And the prospects are smart enough, they're sophisticated enough, they feel it. So what I want you to think about, sales is a discovery process. By asking a lot of questions, you and the prospect discover what product or service that they need and how you can supply that product or service to them. But how do you do that? That's the question I get. All right, Braden, Wayne, these three slides were fantastic, really enjoyed them, but how do we transition from just being a salesperson to be a service industry? And it's as opposed to an interrogation. Some salespeople think that, oh yeah, I'm going to go with my list of questions. I'm going to do a needs analysis. And pretty soon it sounds like they're in a police interrogation room. You really have to be curious and skeptical about how that prospect can utilize your product or service. What happens is, I think we've done this, most of you've been here for a long time. You've seen every pain, you've seen every problem. You walk into a presentation, I'm sure we can help you. I'm sure that we got this, and this. I've gotten emails, phone calls, sales guys recently. I'm sure we can help you with your lead generation. Anybody ever seen anyone like that? I'm sure we can help you with this. And I'm thinking, well, you don't even know anything about me. You can't help me with my lead generation. My lead generation is unique to us. But what if they started with, hey, I'm curious. Help me understand your lead generation source. How do you guys go about generating new leads? I'm not sure if what we have fits in your world. You mind if we have a conversation about what your business is like, and then to see if maybe my product or service can help. And I really think that salespeople should be going into these prospecting calls with people curious and skeptical. And I'm not saying skeptical about your product or service. You know your product or service is a good product. Curious about the application of your product or service to that client's needs. So really be thinking about, hey, I'm curious, help me understand. I'm not sure if there's a fit, as opposed to, oh, I'm sure I can help you. Boy, you're just like everybody else. I really hate when salespeople do that. They try and justify their product or service. They think they're doing a good job by saying, boy, we've dealt with that problem many times before. We've seen this a lot. What is the client thinking when the salesperson's, oh, you're just like everybody else. We've run into this a lot. Boy, this is a common theme that we see. Yep, Greg said it doesn't understand my problem. It's just assuming too much, or I'm different, everybody. And so I think like even when I do some of my outgoing letters, I'll say, I'm not sure if what I've done for hundreds of other clients fits in your world, because not all worlds are the same. Do you mind if we have a conversation about what is unique to you? And then we can decide whether there's some reason to go any further or not. Again, I'm getting across that I've worked with hundreds of other people. I'm not sure if what I've done for hundreds of other people fits in your world, because all worlds aren't alike. I'm not making that assumption that, oh yeah, I've worked with hundreds of companies just like yours. And so the idea is, I really want to go in curious and skeptical. And a lot of people, well, is it an act? No, you really have to be, in your mind, curious and skeptical. This might be a unique situation. They might have something completely different than what I've seen before. On the surface, this might look like every other general contractor I've worked with, and I know all the problems that he has. But there might be something unique to this person I haven't heard before. So you have to go into your presentation thinking about how you can come across as curious about what it is that they need. you need to be a little bit vulnerable. And what I mean by that, salespeople sometimes want to impress the client about their product knowledge, how much they know about the industry. Oh, I've been in the industry 20 years and I've seen it all. And you think you're establishing credibility with the client. But again, that doesn't differentiate you from anybody else, because every other salesperson's doing the same thing. Oh, we've been in this for years. I get a kick out of it. There's a group here just down the street called Metropolitan Builders Association. And they're an association of builders and home contractors and everybody. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with them at all. Yeah, John, yeah. So they asked me to do a training for them. Before I did some research. I went through the first 40 people that are members of the association. I went through their website, and every one of them, somewhere within the first couple of pages or paragraphs in their website, said, we've been in business since, we're a family-owned business. I mean, some of them touted, we've been in business since 1945, and other ones, we've been in business for 7 years, as if that made the difference. We've been in business for 2 years and are really eco-friendly. And I'm thinking, okay, that is what we call a feature. We've been in, how long has Harris been in business? 1985. Okay, that's a feature. Why is that a benefit to the customer? Any thoughts? Why is that a benefit to the customer? Well, what we're assuming is we got years of experience that we can help them. We're applying, hey, we've been in this business since 1985. Okay, so that's the feature. The benefit is assuming that it's a business. But what problem does that solve for the client? See, that's what you got to get. Hey, I'm curious. If I said we've been in business for 37 years, how can that relate to you and your world? And let the client say, well, sometimes I've dealt with other people where on the surface, their price was really low, but it was their first rodeo. And we ran into this problem, because they didn't have that experience. Now the client said it, not you. So always take your features and benefits are important. They're important to you so that you know you're representing a good company. But remember, everything that's important to the client revolves around what problem did you solve for them? So when you take your feature and benefit and you go out and talk to a prospect, and even when you guys are training your dealer network guys, get them to understand what problem does this person have that we need to solve. And then you can talk about what product or service you have that can help them solve that problem. People do not buy products or service. They buy solutions to their problems. So really go into it curious about what problems they have. Again, I think you'll make more sales, not because you have a better product or service, but because you do a better job of finding a problem that your competition didn't find. And that's the way you need to go into your presentation. I got to keep asking questions. I have to be curious and skeptical about what's going on so that I can find a pain that differentiates me from the competition. Because remember, the competition's out there doing the benefits and features thing. Oh, we're the latest, greatest, most improved. We've got this. And it does confuse the customer. What typically happens, what research has shown, is when a customer has multiple vendors vying for the same product or service sale, that the customer, if it's a commodity, if they think that, hey, I can buy the exact same thing somewhere else, yes, 90% of the time the customer buys on price. The other 10% of the time they buy on relationships. They gave me tickets to the Packers or whatever. But the idea is, if that's what's happening, that the people are commoditizing your product, they're saying, I can get the exact same thing somewhere else. I wouldn't blame them for buying on price too. I would too, wouldn't you? So that's why you have to realize that you've got to think about, how do I show that my product or service is different so that the client doesn't commoditize it and say, I can get the exact same thing somewhere else. The only way you do that is through the discovery process of the client discovering that they need the unique value proposition that your product offers. Does anybody remember the four-legged value proposition? What is it? Probably not, but all right. So here's the four-legged value proposition. People buying value. The value proposition, what is the product? That's one leg. What does the product do? 3, what problem does the product solve for the client? And then the fourth leg is, how would the client then evaluate that against the competition? And that's what you need to think about in your discovery process. Get the client to understand what the product is. What does the product do? Get them to recognize the product solves the specific problem that they have. And then you have the right to ask the client, hey, all things being equal, how would you make a decision over one vendor over another? And what is the key element in that? Anybody? As far as the client deciding, how do I decide, all things being equal, which company I'm going to pick and go with? Anybody? What differentiates?
Hopefully it's a salesperson, right?
Absolutely. There you go. You. And that's the thing, that you have a right to ask the person that this goes back to my first slide statement. The professional salesperson can ask uncomfortable questions that the amateur can't, where you can sit there and say, hey, you've got a choice between my product and service and this other customer. And on the surface, the products can perform and maybe do some of the same things. But how do you feel about my relationship? How do you feel about my ability to service you? How do you feel about my ability to be there to back up? Is that a determining factor in your process? You have a right to ask them, and you'd be surprised how many salespeople forget to ask that question. And I will tell you, I run into a lot of bad salespeople. One of my problems is when I go deal with salespeople, being a sales trainer, I'm evaluating them. And I just bought a new car in Colorado last week. And one guy, I told him, I said, you did a great job. You didn't push me in any direction. You asked me a lot of questions. You didn't make any assumptions. You did a really good job. And he even said, hey, you have a choice between the dealership here in Greeley, Colorado, or the one in Fort Collins. I'm just curious, how do you feel about just the relationship that you might develop between the two different dealers? How do you feel about us compared to those? He didn't trash them. He didn't say, hey, they don't follow up, they don't do service. He put up the pressure on me. And I said, that's a good question. I really feel good about you guys. And I ended up spending more money for the same vehicle than I could have got it cheaper at the other place, but I felt the relationship was going to be better. People buy from people, not from companies. And I think that we don't have the guts to ask the client sometimes, hey, how do you feel? If all things being equal, you got a salesman over on the other side, you have me. How have I performed, or how have I done to make you feel comfortable about purchasing from Eris? And get the client to say it. Those are buying signals that you can get. And sometimes people, when they say it out loud, say, yeah, you know what, John, I really think that working with you would be the better option. That helps them, and it helps in their own mind close the sale. So go into curious and skeptical. I want you to remember this, though. If you're telling, you're not selling. So if a statement that you make to the client, a feature or benefit, ends with a period, you're telling them. If it ends with a question, now you're selling. So that's what you got to make sure that you're doing. Am I trying to push somebody? Am I telling somebody, let me tell you why you need to buy our product or service? Or are you asking, hey, I've laid out a couple of different options. Help me understand, how do you feel about these things? Which one would you go with? So are you doing enough questioning so that the client helps you determine whether there's even another fit? So this, one of my rules is, when I say no talking on a sales call, remember, the sales should be 70-30. You should only be doing 30% of the talking. The client should do 70% of it, because your 30% is about questions, asking them questions instead of telling. If I had a salesperson about 2 weeks ago said, oh, I had this great prospect. Man, they were listening attentively. They were giving me buying signals. And I said, well, really, how much of well, I took an hour presentation. They've listened the whole hour. They just let me do a whole presentation. And I'm thinking through the whole thing, really? Were they just stealing all your free consulting? Were you just making them an educated consumer for the next sales guy that comes in? When did you stop and ask them questions? So when you're out there just pitching, doing a demo, are you just into that mode because you've done it so many times that you're going through the motions, if you will? Or are you asking questions about whether anything you're showing this client relates to them or not? So make sure you're asking questions and telling stories. The other thing is, remember, people remember stories much more than they do statistics. So, hey, do you mind if I share with you a story about a similar contractor that we work with? He had this problem, and then you can tell me whether the problems that he had are similar to yours and how we solve those problems might relate in your world. Is that okay? One of the other rules is people can't get mad at you for doing something they gave you permission to do. So before you just go off into a story, ask permission. Hey, is it okay if I tell you a story about somebody else? I know not all worlds are the same, but they had a similar situation, and this is how we solved that. And if we did that here, would that make sense? Would that apply? So that's what your demo should be. If you're out there doing 70% of the talking, you're doing it backwards then. Okay. To you guys, what 3 steps in the system are really designed for the prospect? And remember the system: binary report, upfront contract, pain, budget, decision, fulfillment, post-sell. Of those, which 3 are really designed for the prospect? Nobody? Well, the bonded report is designed really for you guys to understand who is this person, how do they process information, so that you can present your information the best way they receive it. So while the bonded report is for both, it's morally designed for the things we've taught you, the techniques about understanding how this person is. This a visual, auditory? It's all for you, your benefit, so you can present better. The upfront contract is for your benefit. The upfront contract is how much time do we have? What's your objective? Here's my agenda. Here's what I need out of this meeting so I can even go back and run a proposal for you. The upfront contract is for you to set the expectations so that you're running a more clean, professional presentation. Next step is pain. Pain is for the prospect. People are motivated to action by the intensity of their pain. The pain compartment is all about you identifying reasons to do business. I mean, if you don't like the word pain, and again, I think I said to you guys, in all the years that I've been training, when I get a new group in the room and I start doing the system and I talk about pain, I can see some people just start to pull back from me. And I started, and maybe get some pushback and everything. And I started analyzing why. You think I'm teaching you to cause pain, to ask questions that really are painful for the client. And nobody wants to inflict and cause pain on anybody. Pain is there. They already have pain. They just might not know it. And your job is to ask questions that the client discovers pain that maybe they didn't understand was there in this already, because the product that they have, doesn't have the highest resolution. They are not identifying this. They don't have a product that can do this, this, and this that could get them other jobs that they aren't currently getting. Whatever it is, it's your job to help that client discover that they have pain. Now, remember, there's 3 levels of pain: surface pain, business pain, and then personal pain. And in each one of those steps, the first one, the surface pain, the client say, well, we're always looking for a better product. What do you got? That's just surface pain. Business pain. Why are they always looking for a better product? Why? What's wrong with what they've got now? So what's the problem? What's causing the problem? And then the third level, what's the impact that problem is having on them? A professional salesperson has the ability to relate and really find the personal pain. People are motivated to action by the personal pain. And the amateur salesperson, they hear a couple of pains and they stop. Oh, let me show you how we'd fix that. They rush to premature presentation. The professional salesperson, what's the problem? Boy, we don't have a camera can do this and this. What's the impact that problem is having on you? Boy, we're slowing down. We're not able to do this project. We're delayed. It's costing me money. Okay, what's the impact that problem's having on you? That's the motivation. That's what gets people going. And again, this is what differentiates you from your competition, that you have the guts, discipline, vitality to ask what are the personal problems that are caused by this other issue. How does it relate to you? And then you kind of, I'm sure that's not a problem. I'm sure that's not affecting you. Kind of a negative reverse instead of, oh, I'm sure this is a problem for you. And we got a couple slides on that. But remember, the 3 are pain, budget, and decision. Those are all designed for the prospect, for you to make sure we go through these. Hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this problem. Are you willing and able to spend the time, the money, and the effort it's going to take to fix these problems? And can you make a decision to spend the money to fix the problem? That's for the client. That's the conversation that you need to have with them before we're doing any demos, before we're doing any presentations. What's the problem? What's the impact the problem's having on you? Are you willing and able to invest the time, the money? And I would assume in your guy, again, I don't know the details of your product, but doesn't it take time to be trained to learn how to use your product correctly? Isn't that one of the biggest problems sometimes, that they buy a product and then they don't take the time? So are we covering that? Saying, hey, one of the things that differentiates, we're not just going to sell you a product that has all these capabilities. We're going to spend the time, and I just need to know, will you devote the time to it? You know, when I do sales training, for example, there's 3 different players in sales training. Typically you, the student, me, and the sales manager. Who's the most important person in those 3? Me to do the job, the student to learn, or the sales manager? It's the sales manager. Because if the sales manager doesn't take the time to reinforce my training afterwards, my sitting here has no merit, has no, you know, you'll lose half of the content as soon as I leave and walk out the room. Same thing when you talk to a client. You can sell them a great product or service, but will they devote the time and energy it's going to take to learn how to utilize it correctly? So they're not calling you 3 weeks later, hey, the thing isn't working. And it was nothing to do with the product or service. It was the application of it. So that's why you need to have those conversations with them about, are you willing to invest? Budget is the wrong word. Are you willing to invest time and the effort it's going to take besides the money? And then decision is, you know, a decision not to make a decision is a decision. So that's why you have to cover it before you even do, hey, let's say I can solve your problem. Together we discover you have a problem. Together we agree that I can solve the problem. I'm just curious, what's the process you have to go through to make a decision to pull the trigger? And remember Seymours. Seymours are people who can tell you no, but they can't tell you yes. So when you say to somebody, so are you the decision maker? Yeah, and what they're saying is, oh yeah, I can tell you no, but they can't tell you yes. So in the decision step, you need to ask the questions like, who else is involved in this process? And if they say, well, pretty much that's my decision. Okay, yeah, but who else is affected then by your decision? Are there people that are going to have to, like your foreman, you make a decision, but now this person's now has to learn a whole new product line. Let's have that conversation. So I want to make sure you understand that the bond report, the upfront contract are for you, pay and budget decision are for the prospect, fulfillment obviously for you, and post sell so you don't lose what you work so hard to get. And I guess that's not an issue to you guys. Once you sign an agreement, you don't have too many people back out, do you? No. Okay. So pay and budget decision. All right. Couple of tips. Try not to ask verb-led questions like is, can, do, would, and does. Why? Any thoughts about why you try not to ask questions like that? We start with a verb.
Well, more than a yes, no.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, that's the perfect answer I was looking for. That's really what happens is those kind of questions lead to only typically a yes or a no, and you don't get more information. If you haven't written this statement down somewhere, at least memorized it, your job is to get information, not give it. This whole concept of knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have about their product needs, their problems, the more powerful you are as a salesperson. So these type of questions only lead to a yes or no and don't give you enough information. So ask interrogative type of leading questions like who, what, where. When I use this slide, I always say that I do an older reference lost on younger people. At this slide, I sit there and say, why do you want to wear your newspaper reporter hat at this slide? And a lot of people, what are you talking about, newspaper reporter hat? Well, in the old movies, remember the press used to actually have in the brim of their hat that their press pass or credentials. And the idea is you want to think about what a newspaper reporter wants to know. Who, what, where, when, why, how. You know, who's going to make a decision? What will you make the decision based on? When do you need to make a decision? Maybe even where, at what level of the company is the decision made? Why do you go about making the decision? And how's the process done? The day that you go and the committee meets to decide in order to buy our product or service, it's a committee decision sometimes. I'm just curious, hey, the day that that committee meets, let's say somebody's sick and it's an even number. 2 people want to go with theirs, 2 want to go with the competition. I'm just curious, how do you break the tie? And you'll get more information about really who is the influential person in that room. Typically what happens when that, if you are in the group right now and you've got a group that says, well, you know, we're going to have a conversation, we're going to talk, and then we'll let you know. I had this the other day with a company called DSB in Janesville. The vice president of finance, the president of the company, and the chief operating officer runs the plant. Those are the 3 people together. And I made my presentation, and the president goes, well, this sounds good. You know, we're going to have to talk about it, and then we'll let you go. Now, the amateur salesperson, great, fantastic, appreciate it. Thank you. Call me when you're ready. I had the guts to say, you know, I appreciate that. Would it be fair to say, as soon as I walk out the room, you probably are going to have a conversation about what to do? And, well, yeah. And I said, why don't I do this? Why don't I just go sit out in the lobby? You guys go ahead and spend your half hour, whatever. Then if you come up with additional questions, I'm right here. I can come in and answer it. And then you can make a decision to go on any further. So I did. I went out in the lobby. They called me in about a half hour later and said, we're still not sure. And I said, well, help me understand. Let's say you go to make this decision and the president is down in Florida on vacation. Who's going to make the decision of the 2? And they all turned to the chief financial officer. I could just see their eyes do to him. He's the decision maker because he controls the money. The president of the company, quite frankly, he was just telling me his wife just spent $800,000 remodeling their front lobby with artwork and the kitchens for the staff. He's got all kinds of money. He really doesn't even care about the product or food. It's the chief financial officer who's responsible for the bottom line. And he'll tell the operations officer whether they have the money. But I went through who, what, where, when, why, how, and the whole process. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying the amateur salesperson would have walked out of there thinking, oh boy, at least they didn't tell me no. They'll maybe call me back and say yes. The professional salesperson has the guts to get an answer. Whether, and can live with if it's a no. But go for the no, and you won't have so many people out there waiting. Because again, if you don't close them today, the line you've heard this, you usually buy from the last store you shop in. So if I give them that out, and then another sales company comes in behind me, they do a better job, they get the sale. So you have to make sure you're the last store they shop with. I mean, think about any shirt or clothes you just bought. Didn't you buy it from the last store you shopped at? Because even if you saw it at one store and went to another, but then went back to it's still the last store you shopped at. So have the guts. Do not ask type C or D in the DISC profile questions, what and how. Let me explain why. C's and D's are all about facts and figures. And when you start to ask them questions that start with a what, they take it as a personal challenge that you're challenging their past decisions. How did you go about doing that? Why did you do that? You know, when you start doing those kind of questions, be careful about asking type C's and D's, very direct and decisive people, those questions. It comes across as challenging them. I's and S's on the DISC profile are very people oriented. They're okay with when, who, why. So you can ask those type of questions, but you'd be surprised how many times that salespeople think they're doing a job of asking questions, but they're coming across as critical parent. So, for example, old way of selling might have been if I'm selling somebody on hiring people, training, being able to hire only A players is important to you, isn't it? And then what they're thinking is, of course, Mr. Moron, of course. You ever said, if, you know, you want to save money, don't you? No, I love burning through money. I mean, some people, they ask these rhetorical questions that are stupid. The better way of saying, hey, I'm guessing that you limit your hiring only to A players. Would that be fair to say? right? And would that be fair to say is ending it as a question instead of, remember the slide, if it's a state, if it's a period, you're telling, or you're asking it in a question format? I'm guessing that you limit your hiring to only 8 players, don't you? Here's the issue with that. When you start doing statements that are what we call pre-closes or tie downs, like don't you, aren't they, isn't it? This client starts to sense that you're trying to close them. And as soon as they feel you're trying to close them, they start to resist a little bit. So be careful about when you start doing tie down questions with people. Isn't it, shouldn't it? Remember, what are the favorite words of critical parent? Anybody remember? Well, that's why I do reinforcement. You should. You should clean your room. You should do your homework. You should study. You should do this. Remember, favorite critical parent words are you should. Be careful about telling a client what they should do, because they'll usually fight you on it. They'll defend their position where they're at now. Suppose I said, we have this alternative. If I offered that alternative, any reason you wouldn't go with that? That's a lot better than saying, you know what you should do? Here's our solution. You should take our solution. But when you push someone in a direction, they naturally resist. When you're curious and skeptical about the application of your product or service, they will volunteer information that will help you go to the next step. So be careful about these tie-down questions. All right. Never answer an unasked question. What I mean by that is a lot of times salespeople start to oversell. You know, they sell today, educate tomorrow. So don't start, you know, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you, we do this, this, and this, and this. If it wasn't a pain, pitch only to the pains. Don't bring it up yet. Close before you start bringing up other things, because, you know, you start answering unasked questions and it could lead to more confusion or informational paralysis. But it is okay for you to ask unasked questions. If you haven't made a list yet, please make a list of questions you wish the prospect would ask you, because you'd be great with the answer and make you look like a hero. What are things you wish they would ask you so that you can come up and say that, hey, any reason you didn't ask me about the capabilities of the Wolverine 2.0 and how it can do this, this, and this. Any reason you didn't ask me about that? Any reason you didn't ask me about the warranties? A lot of people want to know about these kind of things. You know, the number one question I get clients that ask me is this, this, and this. Is there any reason you didn't? So if there are features and benefits that you want to cover, instead of telling the client about it, put it in a question format. Any reason you didn't ask me about this? Or typically people want to know about that. Is that of interest to you? Because they might sit there and say, no, that's not it. And, you know, instead of you spending a lot of time talking about something, a bullet point that wasn't of relevance to them, put it in a question format. Why didn't you ask me about that? So it's okay with you to ask those kind of questions. Get you more information. You know, I'm guessing it, and then when they do it, I'm guessing it's only a minor issue, right? That's that negative takeaway. I'm sure you're probably doing something about it. It's probably not costing you much. I don't know if you ever get a client that says, well, we're not able to do this job, and this job, and then we're probably losing X amount of dollars. The amateur salesperson goes, oh my God, that's terrible. I'm sure we can do something about that. Where the professional salesperson says, well, is that a little or is that a lot? I mean, $20,000, $30,000 on this job, in your mind, is that a big deal? And let the clients, oh yeah, that's a big deal to us, right? When I'm doing my interaction with some managers and I go through the pain funnel and I'll say, how long has this been a problem? Oh gosh, 3 years. Our sales have been flat for 3 years. Really? What do you think they should be? I think we should be another 100,000 a year in sales. Really? So it's a $300,000 problem because it's been 3 years. Yeah. Is that a little or that a lot? Oh, that's a lot. Now they say it. What if I had said, oh, 100,000? Oh my God, that's terrible. You're losing 100,000 less sales than you should be. See, it doesn't have the impact as if the client says it. So stay behind the 8 ball. When the client gives you a number of how much this is costing them, curious and skeptical. I'm curious, in your world, is that a lot of money? And then they'll say it. Remember, They believe only what you say, half of it, but they believe 100% of what they say. So again, I don't understand how we would be a fit, so you can help me. Dummy curve. The dumber you act, the more people want to help you. So start using some more questioning strategies that differentiate you from everybody else. All right, so I will tell you, a lot of times I've had training and people come to me and say, Wayne, you're contradicting yourself. You said don't ask when questions and don't ask this. And so what's the danger in asking this question though? When do you plan to make a decision about? Why could this be a little contradictory to some of the training I'm already doing? I'm sorry, John, what? That's a good one right there. They're probably not going to tell you the truth about their decision-making process. When do you plan on making a decision? What would be a better decision question? Instead of when do you plan on making a decision? Is there a time frame? Okay. Anybody else? Again, this almost sounds like too much of a tie down. You're trying to get them to close. When you don't need to make a decision. Again, help them explore how they're going to go about making it. Help me understand, how do you go about making a decision? When it's a major decision in your company, like give me in a ballpark, guys, of what a major sale with you guys is. 200,000, a truck, is that a big amount of money? Okay, well, so the idea is, let's say they're spending 100,000. Hey, help me understand. When you guys have to make a major decision, spend 100,000. How do you go about making that decision? And you're acting really, I'm really curious, $100,000 decision. Is it a group decision? Is it a one person decision? How do you go? Sometimes when the decision-making process, asking the client to describe for you how they made their last major purchase and decision to make a purchase helps you understand how they're going to go out and evaluate and make a decision about your product or service. Excuse me. Remember, dummy curve questions. Dummy curve questions are in my world. I'll talk to the manager and say, hey, what keeps you up at night? When you went to bed last night, what was the last thing you were thinking about that kept you up? And typically, oh, how am I going to hit our third quarter goals? How, we missed the second quarter. Now we're already in the third quarter. So how am I going to worry about that? And I get them thinking about pain by asking a dumb question. It's a dumb, what keeps you up at night? And you'd be surprised at the pain they start giving me. All right. Oh, one guy said, I've got a board meeting on August 17th. That's a Thursday. I looked it up already. August 17th, got a board meeting. And I don't know how I'm going to explain to the board that we're probably not going to hit the numbers. Really? Okay. So there's nothing you can do to hit those numbers. Nope. I don't. It's too late. We're not going to be able to hit our numbers. Anything you think I can do about it? Well, you can't help me now, but boy, maybe you can help me with the fourth quarter. So really, do you think I can turn your company around, your sales guys around in the next 2 months if they hit their? I'm thinking we should be talking about next year. What kind of training program we put together, make sure that you're not in this situation a year from now. Would that be fair? He goes, yeah, I guess so. But I did by asking them the pain questions. I don't suppose you have a budget for this process. Remember, that is a better question than saying, so what do you hope to spend? What were you hoping to spend? Nothing. I was hoping it was free. I don't suppose you have a budget set aside for this process. And many times they'll say, no, how'd you plan on moving forward? If it's not a line item that you already have in here for this equipment, where would the money come from? Where would you take it? Do you already have a capital expense budget? Will they come out of your marketing? Where would you find the money to buy my product or service? Help a client discover where the money would come from. Okay. And again, my favorite is who else is affected by this decision. That way you'll get more information about what's going on in the decision step. Okay. Stop sounding like every other salesperson. I know you're busy. I work with busy people like yourself. I know you're trying to save money. That's, if another salesman would have said it, stop it. Don't say it. Differentiate yourself is what this session is all about, is how can you differentiate yourself from the competition if you sound and use the same language that they use. So try and come up with different statements and questions. Watch your language. Remember, critical parent is I need, you're wrong, that's not true. Tell me about this. We're nurturing parent would you be so kind? Would you be surprised to learn? Share is one of the best words that you can use because your mama taught you to share. So, could you share with me this, that? Remember, please avoid critical parent selling. Start doing nurturing parent selling. All right, and how this all relates into the thing that I wanted Jim to send you, and I'll send you again, is your no pressure cold call script. Your no pressure cold call script starts with a pat and interrupt. Most salespeople say things like, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" I say, "I'm sure I caught you at a bad time." Right? Because every so, "Hi, did I catch you at a good time?" "Yes, I was just waiting for a salesman to call. I just, come on. I'm sure I caught you a bad time. You have a couple of minutes on the phone, we can have a conversation." And so you kind of do a negative reverse. My negative reverse is, sounds like this isn't a good time. Sounds like you weren't expecting my phone call. Would it make sense to schedule a time when I should call you back to have a conversation for a couple of minutes? Don't try and sell your product. Remember that no pressure call. What are you trying to do? You're trying to sell the product, or you're just trying to sell either a phone appointment or a face-to-face appointment with them? That's all you're trying to sell. So only try and sell what it is that you're going after. Don't spend 2 minutes trying to educate them about everything your product or service does. It should be an upfront contact. Like, why don't I tell you why I've called? Then you can decide if we should continue the conversation. Are you comfortable with that? Very nurturing. Suppose I tell you why I called, and then you tell me if we have something to discuss. Would that make sense? Now you insert your 30-second commercial. At Air Industries, we do this, this, and this. And I want you to come up with 3 pains. And so the homework I want you guys to do is, what would be, when you're calling somebody and you're trying to get pain, what would be 3 pain points that you would bring up within about 30 seconds? That typically we work with people who have this problem. Sometimes we work with people who have this problem, and many times we work with these problems. Can I ask you a question? Any of those relevant or important to you? So that's what I'd like to hear from you guys. I'd like you to email me. What are the 3 main pain points that you try and come up with to find out whether a client would even, or prospect would even have merit to be a client? What are 3 pains that you can come up with that might resonate with somebody? So in my world, I'll do like, it sounds like this. The interrupt is, "Hi, it's Wayne Dean. Not sure if that name rings a bell." And I don't care if the person goes, "No, yes." I go, "You weren't expecting my phone call?" "No, I wasn't." "You know what? I apologize. Can I take 30 seconds to tell you why I called? Ask you a question, and then you decide if you're going any further. Would that make sense?" And typically I get, "Sure, what do you got?" "Okay." Typically I work with people who they haven't hit their sales numbers. They've got good salespeople. They've hired salespeople, but they just need a nudge. They just need some new way to help encourage them to increase their sales. Sometimes I work with people that the company's got a great product or service, but they're just struggling to hire the right salesperson. So they're looking for some ways of hiring people using some assessment tests. And sometimes I work with people whose sales are great. They've got no problem with sales, but it's the customer service follow-up and the management of the product or service. And can I ask you a question? Any issues you have in the sales department, the customer service, the management department? And I had one guy, sales is great. And this guy sold steel. He said, "Hey, we're fine. We don't need anything." I go, "Well, help me understand. Tell me more." "That's great. I'm glad to hear you don't have any." He says, we got a contract. We sell steel to Amazon, and all those racks and all these big plants that Amazon's building. We can't, I've had to tell my salespeople, don't sell anymore to everybody else because we can't get enough steel to service Amazon. I said, "Okay, so sounds like that might create some other problems for you. I mean, sales are great, but what problems that create for you that sales are so great?" He said, "Well, I'm losing some key salespeople because they're not making the commission they could before because I'm telling them not to sell." So I think I'm gonna have this transition of some of my guys that were doing really well commission-wise that aren't getting bonus checks anymore. I think they're gonna leave me, which is okay, because I can't do anything about it. It just sounds like we need to have a conversation about hiring that next group of salespeople at a lower number. Why, do you do that? Yeah, so my point is the dummy curve, the dumber act, the more information I got about whether I can service them. So I would like you guys to come up with that, come up and tell me for a couple of reasons. I think it's something we can work on in the future for your pain points, but it also helps me understand your company a little bit better about what are the problems that you typically run into. And again, the three things you want to put is not necessarily 3 bullet points off your website. 3 problems typically clients have, and then how you solve them, or those typical problems that you find, and then how you solve them is how you close. Sounds like we might have something to talk about. So I will send you this outline again. I want you to come up with the 3 pain points and email me, and obviously copy Jim on it. Jim, at this point, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Why don't I would think everybody could do it by this Friday, the 21st. So if everybody could send it by this Friday, and I'll send a note out to remind you. I did forward after you reminded me, I did forward the no pressure document.
The outline. Okay.
So off of that, I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but the 30-second commercial and the 25 power questions. If everybody could work on those for the following, say Thursday, we'll talk about them on July 28th. And I'll send an email as well. So the 27th, if you could send out 30-second commercial and 25 power questions, email to me and Wayne, and then we'll, as a team on our sales con call, we'll talk about those on the 28th, since we don't have a conference call this week.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. I just want to remind you on the 30-second commercial, you've got some of the outline and some things that I don't need to go over now because you can read them. But the 30-second commercial isn't to tell the customer everything you do in 30 seconds. The 30-second commercial is to capsulize basically the types of problems you solve for people and why, and to leave it with the client saying, tell me more. That's what it should be about. Not trying to talk as fast as you can in 30 seconds. But follow the outline that I gave you on the 30-second commercial, and give me those pain points by Friday. I really want to know what are the typical types of problems you run into, because clients want to know what are the typical problems that you see and how do you solve them. That's what will make the difference in whether you sell or not, is differentiating yourself from everybody else as far as identifying problems.
Yep.
All right. Jim, anything else? I know you had a hard stop, so.
No, just no. I said that I'll email everybody. Again, it's always good stuff. I don't know if anybody's got any other comments or experiences that they've had in any of this that they want to share. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Well, leave here this week, work on different is better than better. How can I be different than my competition instead of trying to convince the client that I'm better? Just, I really will hope that that's what you do today. Pick a little bit of what you've learned here today and try and differentiate yourself and ask the tough questions that the competition wouldn't have the guts to ask. Okay.
Excellent.
All right, Jim. All right.
Thanks very much.
I'll stop the record. I'll send you the recording too.
Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Everyone.